Good morning, how's everybody doing? Whoa, that's loud. Is that okay? Can you guys hear that okay? Let me just get set up here so I don't forget anything. Yeah, no, this is fine. Just want to put some stuff out. So, first of all, thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be here and kind of share my story. Second of all, I want to say thanks to Gregory. To be totally honest, I had never heard about Creative Mornings until I met Gregory a couple weeks ago and at a consulting opportunity that I'm doing. And he asked me to come speak today and tell you guys about my story. And so when he told me about what the idea was about commitment, I said, man, that's a really interesting topic for me and what I've gone through in my life. And I'm excited to kind of give you guys some examples of how I've been able to kind of overcome some things and go through some things to stay committed to what I'm doing. But before I get started, this picture has a very interesting story. And I'll give you guys a little bit of a background on this. So when I was working at Oakley, I spent a lot of time with a lot of amazing athletes, which was really, really fun. And one of the athletes I got to spend a lot of time with was a golfer named Bubba Watson. Some of you guys probably know who he is, maybe you don't. But we were doing a very unique sort of PR event in New York City around an activation that we did. And we did this whole big thing. We were in a New York hotel room, and we had a huge photographer and this big set, and all these people come and all this stuff. And before he got there, usually, most of the times you might have some stand-in or whatever, have the photographer get set up, have him check out what's going on. And so he was in there before anything started. He said, Nate, go up there and just you be the stand-in. And I'm like, I'm not the stand-in. I'm supposed to manage you. You go do it. He's like, no. So throws me up there. This guy starts taking all these crazy pictures. I'm messing around. Obviously, this picture is pretty jovial in terms of what I'm doing, right? And wasn't expecting to get anything out of it. Just thought it was going to be a couple test shots. And unbeknownst to me, Bubba had worked in the background with the photographer to have this professionally retouched and redone and sent to me as a really nice gift for helping him out. And so I was super appreciative of that. I think the picture turned out pretty good. It's the only professional picture that I have. So if I could give you guys any advice, go spend $100 and have a professional picture taken of yourself, because it really does pay off for whatever you're going to use it for, LinkedIn or your social sites or speaking in front of cool people like you guys. So it's kind of a funny story. So before I get started, let me just give you just a little bit of background on myself, right? So grew up in Orange County. Actually grew up right down the street in Fountain Valley. Went to Fountain Valley High School, played 3 sports there. Stayed local for college, went to Chapman University, graduated with a degree in business and marketing there. Played 2 sports in college, played golf and basketball, which was incredible. I'm not, Deion Sanders or Bo Jackson or anybody like that, but I played 2 sports, which was super fun. And once I graduated, my parents were a huge influence on me and my family, right? And so I have my parents still live in the same house I grew up in. I got a twin sister. She's 2 minutes older than me. She runs marketing for the Golden State Warriors. So I cannot get you tickets. It's the hardest ticket in the world to get. I've tried. She won't give them to me. But she has a pretty cool job too. All my family grew up in San Diego. So all my grandparents, aunts and uncles still live down there. We see them a ton. I'm married, been with my wife for 20 years. I don't probably look old enough to be with somebody for 20 years, but been an amazing journey. I think once you find the right one, you got to hold on to them tight and stick with it. I got 2 kids, Davis and Mackenzie. They're 8 and 11. They're phenomenal. They're super creative. They would love this place. So I'm hoping to bring them down here and check this out. But the reason I'm here, right, is to talk about commitment. And for me, I think commitment has 2 meanings, right? One is you can't have commitment without goals, and you can't have commitment without failure. And I think failure is a scary word for a lot of people, right? Nobody wants to fail, right? Everybody wants to be successful. Everybody wants to be somebody in this world. And I think the one thing I learned when I was at Callaway it was a guy I worked for named Steve Ogg, and he's probably one of the 3 smartest people I know. He's an aerospace engineer. He designed wings for Boeing a long time ago. And the second day I met him, he came up to me and said, I was like 22 years old. He said, Nathan, he's like, the one thing I want you to take away from anything you do in your life is don't be afraid to fail, right? And I think that really hit home with me because I'd always been kind of groomed through sports and my family and education to succeed, right? And the one thing he told me was, he said, when I was at Boeing, my old boss there told me, he's like, if you're not failing 50% of the time, you're not trying. Right? Now that kind of bodes well when some dude's designing airplane wings. I really don't want the plane to fall out of the sky. You know, when you're managing sunglasses or golf clubs, it's a little bit different. But it really struck home with me in terms of, wow, like this guy, as someone who's running a large organization, is really encouraging a young person to not be afraid to fail. And for me, that really hit home because it allowed me to commit to myself and to commit to what my goals were, right? And even when I was young, I had a really high aspiration to want to achieve something great or have, quote unquote, a high profile job to be able to help lead other people. But if you don't have those goals that ladder up to what your commitment is, then you have no idea what you're striving for, right? You're kind of just existing to exist, but you don't have any larger purpose of what you're trying to achieve. And so as I went through this at Callaway, it was something that really struck home. And the question I have for you guys, which leads to this first part of the story, is how many people in here have ever been laid off, or they don't have a job right now, they're looking for a job? Raise your hand for me. Lots of people, right? It's a crazy time in this world in terms of like people not having jobs, people getting laid off. How many people have been laid off more than 4 times? Raise your hand. So I'm maybe the only one, right? And this is not by circumstance or by choice, but the first time I went through it at Callaway was, I think, like 2012-ish, but I had seen it 3 or 4 times before that. So in my entire career, which is almost 20 years long, I've been through or have seen 10 different layoffs in my career, right? Having experienced that, having had to do that, having been through that. And so if you want to talk about commitment, like being committed to yourself, being committed to finding a job, being committed to your family and providing for them, you have to have the utmost confidence and faith in yourself to know that it's all going to be okay, right? And I think the first time you go through this, it's incredibly scary. I was scared out of my mind, right? What am I going to do? I don't have a job. Who am I going to talk to? How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to eat? All these questions come into your mind, right? And it's not an easy thing to go through. But I think once you go through it and you see where you come out on the other end, most of the time from what I've experienced and what I've seen and what I've been through, it always works out for the better, right? You meet different people, you have different experiences, you get different jobs, you have a better opportunity. And like I said, it's not the funnest thing to have to go through, especially if you've gone through it or seen it 10 times. And I think the more you go up the quote-unquote corporate ladder, or you own your own company, or you do something you want to do, at some point in your career, it's going to probably happen to you, and you're probably going to have to do it to somebody else. And I don't know which is worse, right? Personally, it's gosh, I just got laid off, I don't have a job. But having to do it to somebody else, for whatever the reason is no fun at all, right? And I think when you talk about this word commitment, it's anything that you do, being committed to what the journey is, being committed to what the next step is, being committed to who you are, right? And I think all of us who probably have some sort of creative bone in our body, the hardest part about staying committed is staying committed to who you are and what you want to do. And I think for me, early on in my career, that was really, really hard for me to do, because you want to mold yourself into what other people are doing because you see them succeeding, right? But for you to be who you are and to be successful as who you are, you have to stay committed to who you are. And I don't think you can do that without having a goal. The second story that I want to talk to you guys about is a story about ascending the corporate ladder, I guess. And I think all these stories which are related to jobs I had, I think are, hopefully will resonate with all of you, because all of you are going through this right now, right? And whatever your goals and dreams and aspirations are in terms of what you want to do in life, not everybody wants to go run a company. Not everybody wants to go be a VP. Everybody has different goals, right? For me, the title didn't necessarily matter as much as I wanted to be in a position to be able to affect other people that I worked with, right? And most of the time, you don't have the ability to do that unless you have a job that allows you to do that, right? Just because that's how corporate America thinks. But I think a lot of that is a false positive, right? I think anybody in this room can affect anybody that they want to affect. It's just about being true to yourself, being who you are, and standing behind that. But for me, I wanted to ascend to this role of, quote unquote, a VP of marketing, right? And this was a really, really hard thing to do, especially in corporate America, in Orange County. But for me, I set a lot of goals. And to achieve this and to stay committed to what those goals are and becoming and reaching the pinnacle of what I thought was going to be a great job was something that I wanted to do, right? And this role of becoming the vice president of marketing for whatever company, like I said, it's not easy to do. But for me, especially at Callaway, I was seeing people who were going through these roles, people who were getting laid off, people that were getting promoted ahead of you, people that were leaving who were getting better jobs. And I think the things you go through as a human being, you start asking yourself questions like, why that person? Why not me? What am I doing? What am I doing wrong? Why am I not succeeding? Those are all natural questions to ask. And I think anybody who has the will to want to be better, which I think all of you do, you ask those questions, right? And when it comes down to commitment, it really goes back to staying, again, committed to who you are, what you want to do, and what you're trying to achieve. You have to block all this other stuff out. There's so much noise in this world. There's so much, social media, which can be amazing, but it can also be really, really scary, right? And without having these goals, for me, especially at Callaway, there was no way I would have been able to stay committed to what I'm doing. And having a path, right? And having mentors and talking to people who have been there and done that so that you can chart your own course. Nobody can do this on their own, right? And I think when you go through this and you can be committed to what you're doing, it will help you be more successful in the end, right? So this story throughout Callaway, through Oakley, I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And whatever that means to you, right? Does that mean you have to work a ton of hours? Do you take on extra projects? Do you go work with other groups? Do you take a travel assignment that you might not want to go on? Anything that you can do to stay committed to that goal of achieving what you want to achieve is really what allowed me to focus on that future commitment and achieving what I wanted to go be, right? Now, the thing that's tough is I thought this was all going to happen at Callaway, right? I spent 10 years there, thought I was doing an incredible job. We were. 2012 comes around, and the economy kind of craps out, as you guys know, and boom. Callaway went from 3,000 people down to 700. That's a massive, massive cut, right? So no matter how good you are or who you think you are, you're probably going to get cut, right? Because it's a numbers game at that point. And so unfortunately for me, I was involved in that, right? Sucky time. I don't even know how old I am. I'm 30-something at that point in my career, in my life. I got 2 kids. I'm married. I just got now all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, this is like real stuff, right? Like, what am I going to do? But through the power of staying committed to what my goal is or was and what I wanted to achieve, I hit the ground running. I called all my contacts and my networks, in my network, and just started networking to see what was out there. And lo and behold, Callaway and Oakley used the same advertising agency. Come to find out, Oakley's looking for someone to come run global marketing on a couple different categories. I meet this guy, Mike Kroll, and boom, I'm starting at Oakley a month after I got laid off at Callaway. I mean, it's truly an unbelievable story, right? But if you're not committed to what you want to do, you can get in a hole and you can just sit there. And you're going to sit on your couch. You're going to play video games. You're going to go do whatever you do. And next thing you know, holy cow, it's been 9 months and I have no idea what I'm doing, right? Now, I don't believe that you shouldn't take a little bit of time off and take some time for yourself, because work is hard and it's stressful and there's a lot of crazy things. And you should enjoy life. But you got to have a goal that ladders back to something that you're committed to. So got into Oakley, and still I was at the director level, and I wanted to be a VP. Like, that was my ultimate goal. And so I just sought out different people in that organization who had been there and done that, asked them how they did it, tried to find a way for how I could do it, because I didn't want to do it somebody else's way, right? Like, I wanted to do it my way, because I saw some of these men and women who were at the top in these executive roles, and I didn't necessarily aspire to want to be them or do it the way that they wanted to do it, right? I feel like I was, again, committed to who I was, committed to what I wanted to do, and committed to wanting to be who I am, to be a leader in that role. And it took me 4 years at Oakley to get this role, but ultimately I became the vice president of marketing at Oakley, which was a phenomenal job. I'm sure everything you guys could imagine about working at Oakley, it was that and then some. I can just tell you that. It was a phenomenal place. But it's one of those things that really, again, if you're not committed to what you're doing, you can get very splintered into where you go, and you can get on some really big tangents that take you down really wrong paths. So the last story that I have for you guys relates to a project at Oakley. And this is, I think, probably the best example I have of staying committed to something. So when I was at Oakley, Oakley's a huge sponsor of the Olympics, which is an incredible event, as you guys all know. One of the ideas that I had to launch a new piece of eyewear that we were coming out with during the Olympics was this Jetpack idea. So I don't know if any of you guys have heard of or seen this thing that was called Bubba's Hovercraft. Then there was a Bubba's Jetpack. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's one of the funnest projects I've ever worked on, and one of the funnest things I've ever thought of in my career. But this Jetpack, which is literally a real was the world's first flying golf cart jetpack. Right? You could put golf clubs on it, you could put a person in it, it could fly around the golf course, you could land it on a green, you could play golf. Like, it was truly a phenomenal idea, right? And this project was something that was incredibly difficult to manage, and something very difficult to be committed to, because of all the people that were involved, and because of all the steps in the process it took to make this, and to go shoot it, and to get it distributed, etc. So throughout this process, obviously there's a budget component, right? My pitch on the whole thing was, this is the $1 million idea. It literally cost $1 million, and it was the million, every one of your bosses probably comes to you and says, bring me the $1 million idea and we'll do it. Like, I literally said, here's the $1 million idea. Like, I'm bringing it to you. Physically, it's gonna cost you $1 million, and this is the idea that is going to blow this thing out of the water for the Olympics. So lots of changes at Oakley. I went through 3 different CMOs at the time. So every time that a new guy came in, I had to get the budget reapproved and the project reapproved. Like, this is not an easy thing to do when you're asking for $1 million, right? So it could have been very easy to say, new CMO, thanks, like, no big deal. Like, I'm not committed anymore, no big deal. Like, I'm just going to let it go and we're going to go do something else, right? Really not in my nature to do that. I knew and had this vision that this project was going to be something totally incredible. Next guy comes in, he approves it, he leaves. Third guy comes in, finally he approves it, he stays. So that's hurdle number 1, right? We're probably 6-7 months into the project right now. Next part of the process is we have to physically go make a jetpack. The company who is making the jetpack is in New Zealand. Literally every 3 weeks, I would get a call from this agency that's going to help us shoot it, who's based in New York, Think Moto. They're phenomenal guys. I get a call from them every 3 weeks, probably for 9 months. Something is happening, right? The engine doesn't work. The guys don't want to shoot it anymore. They're going to use the Jetpack for something else. Bubba Watson, who is going to be in the Jetpack, he can't go shoot it. He doesn't want to give us permission. We can't do, like, every single hurdle that you could ever think of came up within this 2-year process. Took me 2 years to finish this project. And I think it's the ultimate example of staying committed to something that you truly, truly believe in, right? And I knew deep down in my heart that this project was a revolutionary idea. And to keep pushing and to keep pushing and to keep driving people to say, hey, look, I don't care. What's the next option? What can we do? How can we make this better? What are we going to do to improve this? Asking all those questions to the right people who were involved, and there was a lot of them involved. You got to be committed to that. You got to stay committed to what you're doing, right? And I think commitment is a really, really hard thing to do, right? You guys are all committed. You got up, you came in here, you wanted to hear some people speak this morning. That's a level of commitment, right? But I think the ultimate commitment comes down to, really, it's about your perseverance, right? It's committing to every second, every minute, every day, every month, the whole year long. Like, it's a mental challenge to stay committed to things. It doesn't just happen. Like, you have to physically, in your mind, think about staying committed to stuff. And that was really the conclusion of what happened with the Jetpack. We ended up launching this thing right before the Olympics with this green fade eyewear that we came out with. Worldwide phenomenon, right? Did over 2 billion impressions through digital media, through TV, through social, all that kind of stuff. And it was a worldwide sensation. And it was something that I'm extremely proud of from a commitment standpoint, because it could have been very easy at any point throughout those 2 years to say, like, we're just going to let it go, because it was up to me. It was up to me to stay committed to the project because nobody else really cared about it, right? So if there's one thing that I can give you guys today, it's that. It's staying committed, but I think commitment, like I said in the beginning, it's all about having a goal. If you don't have a goal, you can't stay committed to something. And it's all about failure, right? I've been through a lot of failure, which I'm sure a lot of you guys in here have been through that too. And you know what? It's not a bad thing. It's not. I've been through it. I've experienced it. Does it suck? It sucks. Totally sucks at times, right? But that's life. And for me, I just choose to have a more positive outlook on life. I choose to stay committed to things. I choose to stay positive. And hopefully for you guys, some of these stories with jetpacks, getting laid off, having different jobs, right? Hopefully it will inspire you guys to want to stay committed to what you're doing, right? Which everybody in here has different goals, different aspirations. But if you're not committed to that, it really kind of falls on deaf ears, you know? And I think this word is a unique word, and I'm glad that Gregory asked me to do it, because I think it's really, really relevant to me, my experiences, and my life. So to just kind of wrap it up and to leave you guys with something again, if there's anything you can take away from it, the two most important things in commitment for me, right, are having goals. You got to have goals to stay committed to those, and you can't be afraid to fail. You can't, and I don't think people hear that enough, right? Because everybody fails, and it's not a bad thing to go through. It's really about how you learn from your failures, how you take those, how you apply them to your goals, and how you stay committed to what you want to do. Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate it.